So let it be known that as we're starting this recording, there are like 20 tabs on my screen and I have like an hour.
We'll do it. I'm going to ask you several questions about guns and gun violence in the United States, and we're eventually going to tie that back into education in schools. And
Great.
the focus of our conversation today is actually going to be about the security industrial complex as it relates to school safety and security in the face of rising gun violence. So what's interesting, I just gave this quiz to a group of college students who are taking a social issues and education course, and you can see where their responses are to these questions. So I'll be curious. I haven't indicated the right or wrong ones. I'll be curious to see what you think. So what country do you think has the highest rate of gun ownership?
I mean, this is going to be such a sad video. This is the first thing I'm doing today, FYI. So
hey,
cheers.
Let's do it.
Cheers for a nice.
It was the first thing I did today too.
When you say highest rates of gun ownership, do you mean per capita?
Yeah.
I feel like it's a trick question.
No. Let's just look at the total number of guns. Total.
Oh,
you
I'm gonna say
added up
Switzerland.
all of the guns. False. It's the United States. The United States.
I was just being contrarian. I assumed it was the United States, but because everyone else said United States, I thought maybe there was like a trick in there.
I know. And I kind of gave them grief too, just in the sense of like, with the stamp tool, you get a little peer pressure going on. But yeah, the United States has about 433 million guns.
It's more than the number of people.
More than the number of people, about 100 million more guns than people, actually.
Yeah,
so
that's a lot considering that I only think, what is it, like 50% of people actually have guns?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, dang it. I did the thing. I always used to do this in class. I would give too much context, but it is interesting on their response here, how they vastly
too much context for an answer or question.
My AP Euro students would always count on me to do that. I would always give the answers away. Let's go over to actually then gun deaths. Let's kind of look at that thing. So how many gun deaths do you think were reported in the US in 2021, which I think is the most recent data that we really have good access to?
I bet it's over 40 or close to it.
Okay. And notice how nobody in that original, in the set actually chose that number. They all thought it was much lower. Very similar to how they underestimated the total number of gun ownership. So in 2021, there were 48,830 gun deaths in the United States, which was the most in recorded American history.
Right.
Now, of course, that could be a weird outlier, right? So these other numbers might be more intuitive just because they may track with the other years. I don't have the rest of the data in front of me here.
Right.
So kind of moving.
I'm going to bet tens of thousands of more than most other countries, if not all other countries.
Yes.
Like what is the number of gun deaths reported in Afghanistan? Do we have that data?
Oh God. Number
does that
of
exist?
guns.
I don't know if anyone actually collects that data.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, obviously there's a lot of destabilization in Afghanistan as a result of.
Okay, now take this for what it's worth. This is from wisevoter.com, but it's a very nice infographic. The gun death rate in Afghanistan is 1.32 per 100,000. United States, it's 4.12 per 100,000.
I feel bad even like, it feels kind of gross to even like look that up, but at the exact same time, it is worth noting that like the way that I think we might imagine Afghanistan as being this kind of war-torn, destabilized, awful place to live, still has a minute number of gun deaths versus the United States.
Right. The United States, per 100,000, we are ranked number 32nd. And Afghanistan is ranked number 73. So the United States has more gun deaths.
Lower than I would expect.
It depends probably on how they're counting, deaths by war. Number one is El Salvador, 35, over 35 per 100K. So
goodness.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the highest actual highest gun death rates are going to be in Central and South America, owing largely to disruptions, cartel violence, and those kinds of things. Right. So El Salvador, Venezuela, Guatemala, Colombia, Honduras,
also
Brazil,
partially
Puerto
to blame
Rico.
on the United States. So
yes, but however, so that's based on gun death rate. So that's per 100,000 people. So those are relatively small countries with high gun deaths per their population. But if we just look at gun deaths by country, the United States is actually third.
Okay.
What do you think was the highest cause of death for kids in the United States in 2021? Let's just like stick with most recent.
Gun violence, because I've seen that graphic.
Yep, by far. So it's interesting,
Yeah.
right? It used to be actually car accidents.
Yeah.
And car accidents have been on a really steep decline, and gun violence has been on a really huge uptick. So then I thought it was interesting over here, the year that reported the highest number of school shooting incidents. What do you think?
2021.
It's 2021. Yep, it's by a lot. And I asked the students, so I was like, why did you guys pick 2012? And they said, because that's when Sandy Hook was. So they had just associated that year with Sandy Hook and thought, maybe that was like this flashbulb moment. So interesting kind of point there, how the college students I was talking to underestimated the amounts of guns and gun violence in the United States. So yeah, if you this is from Everytown, USA. They're obviously like a gun control organization, but I find them to be very reliable in terms of their research. So yeah, our gun homicide rate 26 times that of other high income countries. So again, not comparing ourselves to Venezuela, huge political disruptions, social disruptions, et cetera. It was really interesting to just see their visceral reaction to the sheer scope of our outlier status, right? Because they were literally like, when they saw scroll down past all these other countries, and then boom, the US just hits. And that's just homicides, right? So that's a lot per 1,000 in terms of like gun murder. But yeah, so then in terms of how the US compares to other countries, let's keep the train rolling here. If you scroll down, it'll generate some more. When we're talking about firearm deaths, that's more than just homicides. That includes accidental deaths, self-harm, or any time that a firearm is used in an incident that results in death, which is 5 times that of the second highest country, France, which even that was shocking to me to see how France would have been the next highest up there. You don't hear a lot about that in a country like France. If you scroll down, we don't have to go through all of these, but I just think, again, it drives the point home as we were going through here. 8 times more people in the US died from violence by firearm in 2019 than the second highest country, Canada. The US has the highest death rate because of self-harm by firearm. It's in a lot of cases, we think that the causality for self-harm goes one way, but in fact, oftentimes people would say the trigger pulls you, right, and makes you more likely to have this kind of ideation. Yeah. And of course, the impact of these falls disproportionately on women, of course, falls along racial lines as well, and falls a lot on younger people too. And of course, our firearms rate is higher. So they're talk to any gun expert, right? Left, right, center, doesn't matter, right? They will say, anybody who researches this topic says there's a direct correlation between firearms ownership rates and the level of violence associated with guns.
I mean, any graph that just shows you something like this should show you that something a little weird is going on.
Right.
Like it would be different if maybe we were like at 40 on here. We're exponentially higher.
Yes. Yeah, and that's really just the point of these. And again, those other countries that are on the left-hand side of the graph, are all the Central and South American countries that have relatively low rates of gun ownership, but high rates of death. And again, a lot of that, of course, is driven by political instability, cartel violence, all of organized crime, all those kinds of things.
But that are all directly connected to the gun violence in the United States. Like these things are literally like they're all a result of each other.
Yes. Of course, there's a great documentary from Vice. Maybe we can just screenshot or put a link or something in here too. That is all about the direct connection between the really lax gun sales in the United States and where Central and South American cartels get their guns from. Right? It's so easy,
like the
Chris.
Opener to what's that movie? The really good Nicolas Cage movie?
Not God of War. Is it God of War? Lord of War. Yeah, Lord of War. That's it exactly. But
I want to see Nick Cage play like Kratos. He'd do it. But yeah, Lord of War.
Yeah, but even that is really more about like arms dealing. Okay. Sure. What we're talking about with cartel violence is, Chris, you and I, as far as I know, have clean, we could pass a clean background check, right? We've never been incarcerated.
Well,
we don't, I don't know about you, but we could go to Walmart, we could go to a gun store at the Texas border right now, and we could buy a gun, right?
Yeah.
we could drive that gun to the across the border illegally, or if we had contacts to people that are cartel adjacent, they could make arrangements for us to simply drive those guns across the border, deliver them to cartels in Mexico, and
Sure.
then they get traded over there, and they love it. In fact, the Vice documentary includes these quotes from like the Sinaloa cartel members who are like, "Oh yeah, we love the gun laws in the United States. Keep doing exactly what you're doing."
It's never not surprising to me, like going into a Walmart and just seeing a pistol, or like going, well, I don't really go into gun stores, but there are gun stores that exist in the city that I live in, and just like
Yeah,
walking past it and just seeing like casual assault rifles.
yeah,
It's a very surreal experience to me. Um, it'll never not be fascinating.
yeah. Real fun and very quick. But
Yeah.
if you had to guess how many gun stores there are in Mexico, what number would you guess?
Like how many total?
Yeah, total in the
I
whole
bet it's
country.
like some like wildly low number, like 10,
Lower,
5,
lower,
1,
one.
1 gun store. Is it
There's one place in Mexico where you can acquire guns legally. So we've established the U.S. is this huge outlier in the world in terms of our gun ownership and gun deaths. And then very recently, as we said, guns surpassed motor vehicle crashes, which have historically been right the number one killer of kids, right? Because cars are big, fast, but not very safe. But
right? A whole separate issue. Like the fact that we over rely on cars for transportation, but that's beyond the scope of this video.
totally, totally. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, through manufacturing and regulatory schemes, we've made driving much more safer, like per mile, right? Deaths are down in huge numbers, especially for kids. At the same time that we don't have those same things for guns, then that has slowly crept up, particularly in the last 10 years, to become the number one cause of death for kids. Not by much, all right, but it
Right.
is the number one cause, which should disturb anyone to say that the number one cause of death in the United States is not cancer, it's not accidental, ingesting, poison from underneath the kitchen
Right. It's
sink or
being
something. It's
randomly
not.
shot. I mean, because the gun violence rate isn't just mass shootings. It's like accidental death.
It's
Uh,
everything.
it's
Yeah.
you're walking through a parking lot and a dog shoots you in a car. Like we're beyond the
Yes.
pale.
I've even seen ones that like, grandma is walking through the grocery store, has the gun in her purse, but has the toddler in the cart. The toddler
Mhm.
pulls out the gun and shoots grandma, right? So it's just
Yep.
like it's
There's
this
that girl
absolute.
that shot the gun trainer with an Uzi. Like
Mm,
they took them to like the shooting range.
yes.
Um, like it's beyond, like it's even hard for me to talk about this kind of thing because it's so ludicrous. Like this is
Yeah.
like not normal people thought. This is United States propaganda thought. Like there's no sane person who would go through their life, see these experiences and think to themselves, yeah, but it's the Second Amendment. Like that's just not normal. There's something
Right, right,
wrong.
right.
Um,
That it, and
yeah.
that's what is so interesting, right? Like on an entirely separate note, our historical legal conversation around the Second Amendment has changed dramatically in the last 100 years. It didn't always mean, what it means today or what organizations like the NRA say that it means, right? There is a big line of legal argument, even including several Supreme Court justices in the past who have made the case that that interpretation of the Second Amendment is a fraud. So, like, not only then is our sense that right, gun violence is up, gun ownership is up, but school shootings are also up. And depending on how you define it, as one thing or another, but the trend line is very clear that they've gone up dramatically just in the last 10 years. And again, 2021 was recorded the highest number of school shootings to date on record.
To be honest, I mean, part of the reason why, like, I left teaching, I wouldn't say it was a primary reason, but
Yeah,
certainly a secondary reason was fear of being shot at work.
yeah,
Like, I'm not gonna lie, the days that there were mass shootings in the United States and, like, I had to go to work the next day in a classroom setting, I was like, "Yeah, is this, like,
yeah.
really worth it? Do I really wanna be doing this?" Because, it's just that, or whenever you have those Alice trainings at the beginning of the year, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like teaching me to wrap a belt around a doorknob so I can hold it against someone with an assault rifle or whatever. And it's like, this is not what I signed up for. I just want to teach kids. I don't want to. I don't
Yeah.
want. This is not
Yeah.
part of my responsibility. Yeah.
And slightly on that note, right? We've been in conversation with educators abroad who that is for whom that is an appeal for why you should go teach in places outside of the United States, because you don't have to worry about gun violence at school, right? You can just focus on teaching. Whether you're going to go to Denmark or Canada or Australia or
Or
Japan
even
or
someone tried to recruit me once from the UAE to go teach there, and that was one of the appeals. Because I think that part of this is confronting the stereotype that like perhaps life is more dangerous abroad in certain countries, and it is in some regards, like in certain circumstances. But in terms of school shootings, this is again a very United States problem.
those all are a factor in teacher burnout, which is actually where this chart comes from. It comes from a page that's about that. So,
Let's go on to. Are we going on this?
yes. So then let's talk
Okay.
about how it comes to school. Is that okay?
Toothy bags.
Yeah,
Man, that's a terrible name.
yeah.
It sounds like
So,
tushy bags. That's the first thing I think of, like toofy bags. Like it's like a, or it's tuffy. It's
yes,
tuffy, like
it's
being tough. I
toughy,
thought it was
like you're
toothy.
tough. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
tough
tuffy
bag.
bags. You didn't correct me. Sorry, I'm thinking
Okay.
of my dog. My dog is at the groomer, and I think like she has like tushy wipes. Um,
What is interesting, right, in the United States, rather than address the systemic issue, which we just
yep.
had seen in all the data says that the US is an outlier on all of these factors, right? So how do we resolve that, right? The trend is not sustainable. Most people agree that this is probably all bad. So what do we do with it? Well,
Yeah.
fortunately, there's free market capitalism to come in and address the problem by selling parents, students, and schools, and even in some cases, right, through contracts, these solutions to gun violence, not addressing the causes, the amount and availability of guns, mental health crises, domestic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but resolving it through, another tool that they can sell you to try to mitigate that. And that's what
Right.
Tuffy Packs is trying to do, right? They're
Look at
selling
this
you the ultimate
graphic.
protection from attack.
The
Grim, right?
If there's something, I mean, imagine being the graphic designer who has to put a layer on that's a HUD of like a gun going towards a child.
Right.
Also, just how ludicrous that has there ever been in your research on guns someone who has actually done this? Like, I just feel like it's just a very unrealistic way to actually stop an assault rifle from hitting you. This idea
Yeah,
of
right.
grabbing your backpack and doing this. Like, I just think about like the aftermath images of school shootings where, I mean, guns quite literally penetrate walls like drywall, and are powerful enough to take out doors. I just really don't think that if you held your backpack like this, that you would be okay. Like they would just,
Right.
I mean, not to be like too morbid about this, but they would just walk around and shoot you. Like this isn't going to do anything.
Right. Or the thing too is that this is selling false security, because oftentimes, as we'll see, like what this product actually is, if you don't buy the full pack itself, you can buy backpack inserts, that you or I could stick in our
Mm,
laptop bag and then we would be safe. But these things aren't rated for the kinds of rounds that like mass shooters use. Mass shooters
right,
predominantly prefer, semi-automatic rifles, an AR-15, for
right.
example, and those
Yeah,
are
this is
so
boring.
much more
Yeah.
highly powered in the caliber of the bullet, the grains of gunpowder in it, and everything else that is just going to tear through that backpack. So I can neither confirm nor deny.
There's something extra dystopian about putting a distressed American flag pattern on your bulletproof. Imagine you're watching a science fiction movie and it's like this apocalyptic future where everyone has a gun and shooting each other, and you put this flag on your clothing, or
Right.
apparel, I should say. Very odd.
Land of the free, home of the brave.
Yeah.
Let me carry
I
around
can't tell
my
if this is supposed to be like commentary on the current state of the United States or it's supposed to be cool. Um,
right. Go to the backpack inserts. There we go. Let's look at the inserts. Just scroll down there. They were right
Sorry, I'm
there.
also distracted by the names like Ninja Tactical Day Pack.
Yes.
I don't know. It just feels there's something so weird about co-opting. I'm just obsessed with the branding of it. The idea of like you're a ninja.
Or the tactical thing too, because like
Right.
what is that backpack supposed to represent? Like a military backpack, right? This is something that's a desert kind of camo. This is something that's supposed to ape, the operator look for veterans that fought, in Iraq and Afghanistan in the 21st century.
Well, I mean, what kid backpack do you want? Do you want the camo? Do you want the United States flag pattern, or do you want this like childlike school theme? Like, what are we
Yes.
doing?
Click on
Yeah.
the school theme. Let's click on the
All
school
right.
theme. So these are the inserts that you would put. And the
Mm,
kind of the sick part, I think, is they remind me of those paddle boards that you would have at like swim
yeah.
lessons when you were a kid. It
Yeah.
kind of evokes that imagery. And if you zoom in on it too, to see the what the images actually are, they are like a clip art that you would find on like a elementary school teacher's wall. Now it says, I'm trying to see here on that the second set of sentences, it says this specially designed insert is designed to fit into school backpacks and smaller day packs. This insert provides ballistic protection from handgun fire and can stop multiple rounds. And again, if your child is involved in a mass school shooting, not just like a one-off kind of thing, if it's a one-off thing, if it's a kid pulling a handgun out of a backpack, are you going to have the response time, the reaction time to be like, let me get my backpack and my insert to shield myself in this case?
Yeah.
No. But if you're in a mass shooting situation where they have an AR-15, then that's not going to give you any protection anyway.
Yeah. I
Where
mean,
even
the
are we as a
capitalism
country?
truly does breed innovation in this sense because also not to mention, I would imagine, I don't know this, but I would imagine that the instances of gun deaths at elementary schools probably favors, I guess, the spree shooting or like AR-15 style shootings as opposed to handgun violence. Um, I
Yes.
I doubt there's very many third graders taking handguns to school, but sadly there are mass shootings with, I mean, obviously AR-15s. It's happened before.
Most of like the one-off violence is at high schools, right? Gang violence, or a kid brings a pistol or something, or there's something in the parking lot, beef happens. Yeah, the mass shootings are fortunately still very rare, but not as rare as they probably should be. So the sick part, right, is like gun capitalism means that gun manufacturers get to profit off the fact that they can sell guns and accessories and things to shooters, and then some other company like Tuffy Pack get to come in and sell you defense solutions to the same parts of guns. So, and both sides, the manufacturers win, and us as the consumers we lose. So
Yeah.
then, on the other half of this, you have groups like School Safety Solutions, who sells not to private consumers like you and I, but they sell to schools, to door locks in this case, or sliding doors, and all these other kinds of things too. If you want to kind of scroll through, we can get a sense for what they're selling here.
Yeah. This just makes me think of an actual prison. Like this looks like a prison lock.
How much is that kit?
$300.
$299, and
Yeah.
that's for a single door. Okay, we've got
Yeah.
50 doors in this school that all need to be kitted out with the teacher lock too. Okay,
Yeah.
cut school safety solutions a check, and here we go.
This is the same thing here.
Oh my god, and
Right?
it's like the same
NAA,
layout. Is it basically the same company?
the same protocols as this massive prison door.
Wow.
Um, which I assume means it's like bulletproof in some way. Yeah, ballistic proof, so you can't just like shoot off the door thing. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it just there's something extra like dark about the fact that we're using the same prison resources.
Yeah. And let's not forget too that like in the wake of the Uvalde shooting, a lot of the conversation was on this door control issue, because
Yeah,
politicians who didn't want to lay the blame on guns or, mental health or any of those other kinds of scapegoats were like, oh, a teacher left the door open. So, there's really the teacher's fault that this mass shooting happened. And I don't know whether or not this is true or not. I haven't followed up on anything, but I remember that discourse happening. So of course, a company like School Safety Solutions or whatever is going to swoop in and say, hey, door control, there's a product for that. And as you can see here, too, these big old lockdown shades
shades. Yeah.
are a whole other thing.
I'm always bothered by the narrative that it's because someone left a door open or something like that, because I couldn't imagine being a teacher in that scenario. Like, imagine if you were the teacher who was blamed for leaving the door open as a result of children dying. Because
Yeah.
even though this is a systemic problem, certainly you're going to internalize that and feel like you're the one to blame. And I couldn't imagine being that person.
Yeah.
Um,
It's about individualizing, the problems and the solutions. We don't have a gun problem in the United States. We have a violence problem or a mental health problem or whatever. It's just a bunch of crazy people out here doing this.
this is the Tourniquet 4. This was the third product on
Okay.
our website.
So this is
Gen
like a bleed
4.
bleed control kit kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it's actually like a military. Like, I feel like I'm watching one of those America's Army commercials where they're trying to like show
Yeah.
off how cool the army is and showing them like doing special ops and like not showing the killing part. This is still part of the school website, by the way. I'm still on the school website content. So also just so insane the idea that again, teachers would be trained to use a tourniquet in class.
Right.
Look how metal this is.
It's ironic too because that symbol is like the Blue Cross kind of thing, you know, the medical
It's
thing.
badass Blue Cross.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
go to the bleed control thing real quick because I have a
Okay.
quick comment on that. Since 2020, Texas law has required schools to make bleeding control stations available, but require that school districts offer instruction on the use of a bleeding control station to students beginning in third grade. And the law requires the bleeding control station contain tourniquets approved for
Uh-huh.
use in battlefield
Yeah.
trauma care by the Armed Forces of the United States. That's a direct quote. And instructional documents developed by the American College of Surgeons or the U.S. Department of Homeland Security detailing methods to prevent blood loss following a traumatic event.
I just really wanted to go to this one. So they had the classroom emergency supplies, which is like it's like when you're supposed to keep the emergency supplies in your car, like if your car breaks down or something.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
this blew my mind. So it has like a toilet, like a bucket. So I guess
Yes.
you could use the restroom when you're stuck in lockdown. Food, like 400 calorie food bars and water pouches.
Yes.
This reminds me of the subgenre of it's not called like survivor core, but like the idea of like people who what's that called? Where you
Survivalism kind of thing, you know,
well,
where you
I'm thinking of
stock
the
up
people
on
that like
rations and food and
preppers. It's like
water.
prepper culture.
Preppers. Yeah.
It's like prepper culture comes to education.
Oh, dude,
Um
it totally is.
like this
It
idea
totally is.
of it's not the system that's failing. We shouldn't be fighting against the system. I'll take care of it on my own. So kids, I got my iPad, gauze pads, my burn cream, everything's ready to go. Something happens, we'll camp out inside our classroom and I'll get
Yeah.
my pistol out and shoot them or whatever. It's
Yes.
it's just an
Right.
insane an absolutely insane thing to do.
Now, do you want to hear
Yeah.
a really insidious thing? Do you recall this vicious, like, hoax rumor thing that was going around for a while about like litter boxes in school?
Yeah.
The origin of this was apparently that in a school district, I believe it was in Colorado, right? Forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but they had made available litter, cat litter, just like you would buy at the store, right? Not in the form of a litter box, but the cat
Yeah.
litter to have stocked in rooms for exactly this purpose, for exactly the kind of kit that you're looking at. So that is the origin also of that vicious anti-trans rumor. So the last part of this then, right? So there's the individual providers or individual manufacturers providing market solutions to the problem of gun violence to parents and to schools. Well, the last part of that then is, okay, what do we do when violence breaks out in the school? And
Is this Ohio?
let's just watch this. Let's just watch it. Let's watch and listen.
911, what is your emergency?
I think I hear gunshots.
I think there's somebody shooting in here.
It sounds like there are gunshots in the hallway.
I want you to take cover. Yeah.
When I walked into that bathroom, I heard one person say, you don't have to do this. Nobody has died yet.
The average response time is somewhere in between 10 and 20 minutes.
Relentless gunfire. Initially believed that they're evacuating.
Everything that you think you would do, you don't do. Your common sense goes out the window.
The better you make the training, the better prepared your students or your people are going to be if they ever have to truly act.
It's not just for the school, it's for everyday life.
The ALICE training method, it's so important because it forces you to look at everything very differently.
Sometimes bad things happen, and it pays to be prepared.
That's extra spooky me because that is Urbana, Ohio. It's on 68. That's like 25 minutes away from where I live.
Well, yeah, they're trying to sell you, right, another product. And what is that product? In this case, it's Alice training. So I sent you a graphic in the YouTube Discord if you want to pull that up, just so we can talk about what that stands for, and then we can look at those pictures. Alice has been, for some reason, right, adopted as the primary solution. Now, there's a lot of like lockdown trainings and all these other kinds of different versions. We'll look at another one here as a video. It's like Run, Hide, Fight, which is kind of a version of
that's
this.
what we used.
But but Alice is the one that I was familiar with and I was trained in, which is alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. And this was sort of the answer to just lockdown or shelter in place. And it added on these like counter and evacuate, which really are the most controversial thing. So this is like a local news look at what this active shooter, I think this is like Alice training, looks like for teachers in schools.
Now, as we mentioned a moment ago, students sadly are trained for situations like this, and some of that training was on display in a video that showed us the intensity, I think you'd say, of the moment.
Yeah, it really was. And Paula Tutman gives us an inside look at the active shooter training and a safety measure that many schools do not implement.
Since Columbine, even communities that say,
you never think it's going to happen here,
prepare for it to happen here. At Oxford High School yesterday, experts who've watched video from inside panicked classrooms say it is clear many of the students were specifically trained in active shooter protocols. Chief Mark Gordon, the police chief for Oakland University, does active trainer shooting called Run, Hide, Fight.
We know training works from previous shooting incidents that have occurred, that when you train to a specific goal, it is recalled quicker. You cannot make up preparedness. You cannot make up a response, an appropriate response.
Okay, pause it. Okay. So Run, Hide, Fight is just a different branded version of Alice. So when I watched this earlier, I totally thought it was Alice because this is the kind of thing that we did, right?
Well,
we
it's
were given
worth
little
noting.
dodgeballs.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Run, Hide, Fight is not necessarily a brand. It's an acronym for understand. So you can do Alice training with Run, Hide, Fight, but Run, Hide, Fight is just an acronym to remember for general school safety. So like when I was a teacher, we learned Run, Hide, Fight, but we did not have Alice training.
Oh, interesting.
It's
Alice
what's
is like the proprietary.
Yeah. So Run, Hide, Fight is what's commonly accepted now by law enforcement experts, so like police officers, people like in the field, as just a general way to understand what you should do. It's in response to, I think what you and I might have grown up with is lockdowns, like where you just, lock the door and hide inside a room. That is no longer the mainstream way because there was too many instances of kids getting killed when they lock down because that doesn't really protect you.
Yeah.
Instead,
Sandy Hook in particular, right?
Right. So Run, Hide, Fight is exactly what it sounds like. You train kids, go run away. Yeah.
If push comes to shove, as we just saw, if you rewind it 5 or 10 seconds, then you fight. And look how they're training them to fight somebody with a gun.
Yeah, so they're throwing...
Okay. Well, they're barricading the door, and then when they come in... So this is supposed to, I guess, interrupt the shooter's attention, so that way, they can't get a bead on any particular person because they're having to dodge, out of the way at the same time. And when we went through this training, we were all in a big conference room. We had... somebody there talking about like breaking this OODA loop. It was OODA. I don't remember what it was, but like as you're trying to acquire targets, the more that you're interrupted, the less successful that you will be. So we had a teacher volunteer who was supposed to like train some virtual object on a digital board, almost like an old school, like Nintendo laser gun kind of thing. And we were all given like foam dodgeballs from the PE room to throw at him. And he was so good at this, it entirely disproved the point that when you know that these things are coming, right, it's really easy to actually double down on your focus and, maintain the target. And the sad reality of a lot of these, too, is that the shooters are often students. So they are familiar with, they don't come from outside of the school system. They're not just walking in blindly into these situations. So the students who are perpetrating mass shootings inside schools know the lay of the land. They know how this stuff is going to work.
Not
now,
to mention, the weapons themselves are designed to basically be sprayed. So you don't necessarily even need to aim. I mean, if you have a group of people and you just start firing rapidly, even if you're being pelted with these things. I mean, in this picture right here, all of those people in front of the shooter are pretty much dead. I mean, look at where
Yes.
he's aiming the gun.
Also, just rewind it just like 5 seconds here real quick.
To here?
Literally, just pause it here.
Yeah.
Literally, he's already shooting and they're already dead. So I'm sorry, like that's grim. But right, he's not just going to walk in and then start to pick off targets, So again, I think in these cases, it's very often the case that yes, more preparedness, as in any disaster preparedness, is good. I've got gallons of water in my storage room. Just in case, tornado or something else kind of happens, we at least have some fresh water or something, In this case, yes, important for kids to know, like, okay, don't open the door for people or try to get out of the line of sight of these things. And yes, that can be important. But, I think I just don't know about the efficacy of this counter, which really seems absurd. You can
They've
probably
also
finish watching
studied
this
that.
video. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have my emotional support cat here with me right now.
It's true.
But it also has been studied that situations like this, where you force kids into doing preparation in this way, it arguably leads to more harm than good. I definitely think it's worthwhile for kids to have basic understanding of what do you do in an active shooter situation. I think run, hide, fight's fine. Like this idea of get the hell away. Like your natural instinct in that situation should not be to freeze and hide somewhere. If you can get away, get away. And covering that with kids is fine. But this idea of putting kids into a room and having them role play hitting an active shooter with a gun. I mean, these kids are laughing about it, but there's something problematic and probably like I imagine maybe these kids were told to smile. I don't know, but I just imagine doing this with the kids that I taught when I was teaching, and I know that a solid number of them would be hyper traumatized by this.
Childhood trauma experts have actually chimed in. One was quoted in the New York Times as saying, a whole new cottage industry has emerged where people who don't know anything about kids are jumping in and adapting protocols for groups like police officers or people preparing for combat. The number of developmentally uninformed, child uninformed, and completely stupid ideas is mind-numbing.
There has to be a memory of what you're supposed to do.
There are different kinds of training. You often hear of ALICE training, which is an acronym for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter,
all
Evacuate.
These people are dead, right?
Yeah. I also hate...
What are we doing?
I mean, I don't blame them because it's awkward and it's like Nerf guns or whatever, but I don't know. The idea of running through a hallway, like they look like they're having fun. And I just feel like there's something very dark about role playing this and having fun, considering the context for what is going on here. I don't know. It's just,
and and this to me too just strikes me as like the opposite of what you would want to be doing anyway. You're not going out of your way to find the shooter to throw some crap at them, right? If the shooter is in the hallway, you are not running down that particular hallway. But that's what, to me, run and hide would precede the fight part. I'm not seeking the fight.
Right. I mean, it's supposed to be that it is the worst possible case scenario because, again, the gun is so powerful that you're kind of, I mean, it's just luck. Like if you're getting away and you're at the point where you're there, like you're on your own. That's the sad state of things. But I don't know, again, just like the role playing of it and turning it into something that's like a game feels, it almost feels like hyper capitalist in a very strange way, like marketing the idea of the violence itself and consuming it as a
right. Well, it tells you you're prepared for an incident of violence because you did this, right? You're not prepared, right? Let's finish it.
Form, counter, evacuate. Last night, our Devin Skillion talked to the CEO of ALICE Training.
What we try and educate and train on is how to survive and bridge that gap between the first shot and when help arrives.
But while schools put on active shooter training and lock doors and institute buzz-ins as safety protocols for daily school life, many superintendents I spoke to today say that the often talked about metal detectors at the front doors, well, that conversation is usually a non-starter. And even Oakland County Sheriff Mike Bouchard says he doesn't believe metal detectors work, even though you can often find them in urban, inner-city public school settings, along with other safety protocols.
Most schools in America don't have metal detectors, and most schools in America will never face a tragedy like this. And there's a
a trade-off, in terms of the environment and the feel and the nature of that.
The question is,
if a kid has a gun, they're walking in and shooting people. Like, it's not like they're, you know, they're gonna see like a metal detector and think to themselves like, oh, can't go in there.
Yes. Well, I think of, Sandy Hook. They just shot their way inside of everything. The metal detector wouldn't have mattered at all. They were shooting the second that they got arrived at the door. And most buildings just have big glass facades because they're nice, open learning spaces. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty pointless. We probably don't need to watch some of these other things. Let's look at that set of pictures that I sent you about the counter system. So these are actually screenshots from the training that I had to do. So basically our ALICE training for the most part was like a module, just like bloodborne pathogens. Anybody in education is familiar with bloodborne pathogens. You got to do that crap every year. So, alongside the list, I've got it running on my computer in the background while I'm getting my room set up before the beginning of the year. We would have to do these ALICE trainings. And of course, the alert, the lockdown, the inform, all of that is kind of common sense. Like an alert comes over the intercom and, you make sure your door is locked and all of these. But when you get into that counter is where things really start to divert from reality. So in these images, right, we were shown like, here's when to counter. And here is, Miss Jackson with her 8th grade math class, all holding up classroom utensils to use against the school shooter, just standing up in a line like they were in a Napoleonic war waiting to die. Like it's such an absurdity. And then next to it, it says distraction techniques, throw. So here you've got a colored pencil, right? Or you've got a coffee cup, or you have an apple or a calculator. Throw those at the person that has an AR-15. And I love this one down here in the bottom left showing, right? Of course, your average mass shooter, quite frankly, white guy with an AR-15. And I'm supposed to use the fire extinguisher against him? What? Like, it's pure madness. And then over here on the right is a screenshot from a video that showed the students tackling and actually subduing the shooter, tying off their feet with all these different things. So really like preparing students to be prepared to
has zip ties lying around. I guess it's part of your survival kit.
Part of your survival kit.
Yeah.
But these were actual instructions that I was given on what to do in case this happened, right? We weren't given access to fire extinguishers, but it really does put the blame back on me as a teacher or on the students to say like, oh, God, you died because you must not have countered effectively, or all these other things.
It absolves individualism of the
it absolves the system of its blame for allowing the proliferation of guns into the hands of and creating violent people in the first place, and saying, nope, you need to defend against that.
I mean, I don't know if this is the case in Iowa, but here in Ohio, some of the school districts that were neighboring my own authorized teachers carrying weapons in the classroom. It was kind of on the down low. People didn't really talk about it, and no one really knew what was going on. But there were multiple schools that had teachers that had pistols in their desk. I mean, it's ludicrous on two levels. On the one level, the idea that a teacher is going to be able to shoot back at someone with one of these weapons and successfully defend themselves is absurd, considering that even police officers are scared to go in and solve. We've seen that. People who are formally trained to do this type of stuff, nerves take over. It's not as easy as it sounds. But on the second hand, the amount of gun deaths that are probably more likely to happen as a result of having actual guns in the building normally is terrifying. Like, imagine your average, sorry to stereotype here, but imagine your average athletic director with a pistol. That if you went to like a school that had like a football program or something, I do not want that guy. Typically a guy. I don't want that typical guy to have a gun. No way at all. Because the one day that he gets really upset because he's, on the brink of some kind of problem, he's gonna shoot someone. Or threaten to shoot someone, or a kid's gonna sneak in and know that the gun's in there, and they're gonna take the gun. Like there's so many issues.
Now open the link. I just sent you a link in Discord, just real quick, because it's emblematic of what you had just mentioned here. And I laugh I only
Yeah.
laugh because what else can you do, right? It's
Right.
exactly what you said. You're more likely. So here's how the stats play out. If you have a gun in your home, you and your family are more likely to be injured by that gun than you are to use it in self-defense. Right?
Of
That's
course.
what the data. That's what the
Yeah.
data and the stats play out. And so imagine that, but in schools, if you voluntarily bring guns into schools, accidents and incidents are going to happen. So here's a Texas superintendent who resigned after a student finds his gun in the school bathroom. The incident comes as lawmakers debate how to make schools safer in the wake of Uvalde.
Why is he taking his gun into the bathroom?
Well, you're struggling with your zipper here. You got to put the gun down on the
So he has it like
thing next to you.
holstered. It's not even like locked away in a safe or something. He's just carrying around a gun.
That's it, right? We talked about all the problems with things, but this Alice training and the run, hide, fight ethos is ubiquitous. Okay, but here's the deal: there's really not a lot of evidence that shows that this works, because how do you possibly what is the sample size that you would have to show any efficacy behind these things? It's not really a falsifiable premise anyway, because okay, if you get killed in a shooting, is that because you weren't run, hiding, and fighting correctly? Is it because you weren't this? So it's like they get to take credit when there's success, and they get to defer the blame, when it fails. And this is an article from The Trace, which is a great website that does a lot of like gun violence journalism. Super objective, I found in my look at it. But yeah, they did an investigation into Alice training in particular, and found that the harms and the trauma and the claims don't add up when stacked up with the evidence. So
as someone who went through these trainings, I dreaded these trainings. I never even had to do the counterpart, but they would still show us, like, they would open up with a video of a school shooting in order to, again, set the tone, with the idea that teachers don't know. All teachers know. Like, I think out of anyone outside of obviously people with children, but like teachers are the ones that are probably most aware of just how dangerous and scary this is.
And I think, again, our lens is always systemic, right? So it's like, look at the ways that we're trying to cope with not actually addressing the problems at their source, right? The source is we have 433 million unregulated, primarily guns in the United States, more guns than people, right? We have more gun deaths than most of the rest of the world combined. Those are disproportionately impacting children, communities of color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And right, our solution to that is to sell us the false hope of protection through bulletproof backpacks, security, increased security for schools, and then this training that actually induces or recreates, right? If you're a kid who already has violence trauma, or if you're a teacher or an adult who already has this, then you're reliving these things constantly as a result of these lockdown drills that we don't even have a lot of evidence that work.
Right. I mean, to me, this is just an example of schools shelling out a lot of money so a bunch of white guys can play cowboy. And if
you read this article, that is it to a T, right? Yeah. These are oftentimes ex-cops or people who still work in law enforcement, who just kind of, right, they have, for lack of a better word, cop vibes, right? They're not in teaching and education. So they don't understand, how this kind of thing can work in an education setting. There are horror stories of these kinds of trainings gone awry, many of which I had already mentioned. But don't despair. A lot of Americans think that this is an unsustainable trajectory, and there are a ton of policy options on the table, both to address guns, to address who can acquire them, and how they can be allowed to be used in the sense of accessories, high capacity magazines, et cetera. So this is a report from the New York Times where they actually surveyed the members of the general public to see their support for various policy interventions, and also polled gun violence experts. And they made this awesome grid of like, hey, here's interventions Americans support, and here's where the experts agree are effective things. So all of the ones in this quadrant over here that's highlighted have more than 50% support, and more than 50% of experts say they would work. So the most effective and most popular are like universal background checks, right? Make it harder for people to get guns, and right, you will end up with fewer guns that are out there. Kind of a no-brainer. Make laws requiring lost or stolen guns, and then if that gun is used in a crime, if you haven't reported it, you're on the hook, right? Because you were not behaving like a law-abiding, responsible gun owner. And barring sales to people who have domestic violence records, because there is a huge correlation between, gun violence and domestic violence and domestic abuse. Barring sales to all violent criminals, 3-day waiting periods, right? Kind of pick a policy suite of solutions from this quadrant, and we would have some kind of impact either on day-to-day gun deaths, school shootings, mass shootings, right? Kind of all of the things in there, but pick the top 5 things. Americans agree on them. Experts say they're going to work. We don't have to repeal the Second Amendment or anything else, but we can make an impact with these going forward. So I think Everytown, I think is my real go-to as far as data, as far as policy plans. They may be the oldest, most established kind of organization there, but you can get involved and in their advocacy on their website too, if you feel so inclined. Another organization that you can join is Giffords. And this was founded by Congresswoman Gabby Giffords after she was actually the victim of a horrifically violent mass shooting. And of course, the last one is March for Our Lives, which, if you're aware of like David Hogg and the Parkland kids who survived the Parkland shooting there and really launched a mass student movement against gun violence. So if you're a young person, look over there. They have chapters in different cities or on campuses and universities throughout the country that you can probably get involved in to help end the fight, or donate, or use the information on there to be able to write letters to your representatives and stuff. I know in the scheme of things in the world, our own domestic gun violence situation has kind of taken a back seat, but there's always time to at the bare minimum write a letter, get involved, educate yourself, or donate a little bit to help these causes.